Hello and welcome to episode 4 Random Books, number 21. Yes, number 21. Good Lord. It feels weird to say that. It really does. And let's see, which one shall we pick for this 4 random books? These 4 will do perfectly. Yes, they will. These 4 will do perfectly. It's always fun to pick the books for 4 random books, and what I've done is, I have to admit, is I have a lovely pile of books here. I have about 10 episodes worth sitting to my right. So, I'm going to start with Target Tirptiz by Patrick Bishop. And today's theme is special operations of a highly special kind. It's got pictures, including one of Hitler. But mostly it's got actually of quite good looking people and some who actually have decent beards. It's so hard to find someone with a decent beard in the 1930s, it really is. I kid, of course, but you know. The sunken ships were carrying valuable war material, and 77 aircraft, 147 tanks, and 770 military vehicles were now on the bottom of the Arctic Ocean. It amounted to a quarter of the cargo. In a single day, a few Luftwaffe aircraft had disposed of material that it might take an armoured brigade a month to destroy. They had done so at relatively little cost. The danger from the air was already plain. After the experiences of PQ-15, the Commander-in-Chief of the Home Fleet, Sir John Tovey, had agreed with Admiral Bonham Carter that unless the airfields from which the Luftwaffe operated in northern Norway could be knocked out or the convoys allowed to the cover of the darkness, the whole punishing exercise should stop. If they must continue for political reasons, very serious and heavy losses must be expected, he wrote. Like his chief, Admiral Pound, he believed the strategic situation was wholly favourable to the enemy. Well, I've done some videos on PQ-17 last year now, considering when this is going to come out. And yeah, daytime operations or summer operations for the Arctic convoys were especially difficult. In the Admiralty, preparations for the next convoy took place in an atmosphere of impending disaster. The official historian of the war at sea, Captain Stephen Ruskell, wrote that it was plain to all involved in the working of planning of the convoys and the associated fleet movements and in the long drawn-out anxieties of their execution that we were gambling with fate to an extent that was bound, sooner or later, to provoke nemesis. All realized that a disaster was likely, but when and on which convoy would it fall? PQ-15, PQ-16, PQ-17. They all have issues. And PQ-17, of course, most famously has the biggest issues of all, but they're all related to the need to defend the convoys against the triple-axis threat of underwater U-boats, aircraft, and of major surface raiders, and the balancing act that ensues. And it's a complicated battle, and it's how this Target Tirptiz comes in. And this was an especially good find because it's only cost me $2.99, and that's always a wonderful thing. Just slightly cheaper than my Patreon fund, which is, I think, instead of £3 a month. John Laffin, Raiders, Great Exploits of the Second World War, and my favourite in this is the Long Range Desert Patrol. Can I find them? Yes. It was a tough life. A patrol was out from the base for 3 weeks, and it covered up to 2,000 miles. Since the Chev under desert conditions gave no more than 6 miles per gallon, the trucks had to carry large quantities of fuel. The water ration was 6 pints per man per day, which during the hottest months was barely adequate. Sometimes 10 or even more trucks set off on patrol simply in order to carry petrol, water, ammunition, and other supplies. Like the SAS, RDG patrols raided airfields and attacked isolated Italian forts. An early success was the raid on Mozac, near the Chad border. during which 3 Italian aircraft and a fuel dump were destroyed. Mosul was so far away from any of the North African campaigning areas that the Saddle Italians could not even imagine where the raiders had come from. It was unbelievable that they could cross thousands of miles of sand sea. The LRDG's ability to raid at will destroyed Italians' morale. Early in March 1941, General Leclerc, commander of the Free French North Africa, captured Kufra Oasis from the Italians, thus providing the LRDG and SAS patrols with their main forward base. In desert terms, Kufra was a desirable place if only because it had limitless supplies of fresh water, as well as large areas of palm trees, which the raiders sought the moment they arrived in Kufra from a mission. After exposure, day after day, to the blistering metallic sun, it was an immense relief to be deep in the shade. Patrol commanders tried to give their men 3 days' rest in Kufra. It is difficult to single out one exploit as outstanding from among the hundreds of missions carried out by the LRDG, but without claiming it to be the best, I can perhaps put forward a classic patrol by the LRDG, and one which showed opportunism and audacity. Late in 1941, the LRDG's G1 patrol, under Captain A.M. Hay, emerged from the desert waste to find targets on the main axis communications artery, the road from Benghazi to eastwards to the fighting areas. The men already knew that the enemy base at Beda From was a fruitful operating area. An Italian pilot spotted them and dropped bombs, but the patrol's Bren guns frightened him off. The Italian called up a German Junkers 87, whose crew made strafing machine gun and bombing runs against the LRDG trucks. Remarkably, Hay, his men, and their vehicles came through this ordeal unscathed. They headed for concealment in a wadi they knew of old, and here they spent an uneventful night. Scouting on foot next day, Hay lay on a low bridge and swept the country with his binoculars. He located a choice of targets, but the best was a vehicle park close to some huts, built as a form of way station for crews on their long journeys to and from the front. That evening at dusk, Captain Hay led his trucks at a steady speed along the Benghazi road. Any transport was moving in both directions, but nobody paid any attention to the 30 CWT trucks. Perhaps because the Germans and Italians both used captured British vehicles and they were accustomed to seeing Chevs. In any case, they would never have thought that the British would drive openly along the highway, especially after how many generals had been captured driving along fricking highways. At the way station recreation huts, Hay's drivers turned off the road and unhurriedly took up the best position possible for attack. Then they began a raking fire with Vickers machine guns, Bren machine guns, tank attack rifles, and Tommy guns. Enemy soldiers, shocked by the surprise of the attack, fell in heaps, and some of their vehicles caught fire. To add to the confusion, the LRDG troopers tossed grenades into the huts. By the time the enemy troops reorganized themselves, the raiders had long gone. Enemy aircraft were soon hunting for them, and their search continued throughout the following day. Again, well camouflaged in a friendly wadi, the patrol slept without alarm. When dusk once more gave him cover, Hay machine gunned and set fire to a petrol tanker. Then, as ordered, he returned to base in Siwa Oasis without having suffered a single casualty. His raid has been as successful as any carried out by the SAS. LRDG are some of the coolest customers known to mankind. And often when I see some of the modus operandi used by the Special Forces Support Group, set up to support special operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, they do remind me of the LRDG more than they remind me of traditional special operations units. And they do well. They do. Pegasus Bridge. It's always fun. It's Pegasus Bridge. And I have to remember to keep the microphone as far down there as possible, because I found that's better for the sound. In March 1944, the 2 reinforcements arrived at the bridge. One was Vern Brock, who had got caught up by the Gestapo in Warsaw, sent to a 6-week training camp where he could hardly understand the German NCOs, and then was posted to the 716th Infantry Division on the coast of north of Caen. Helmut Romer had finished his Berlin schooling, been drafted, sent to training camp, and then also posted to 716th. Under Cafe, Teresa Gondre had given birth to another daughter, to go with 6-year-old Georgette. Heinz Hickman spent most of 1943 fighting, He participated in the campaign in Sicily, then fought at Salerno and Cassino. At Cassino his regiment took such heavy losses that it had to be pulled back to Bologna for rebuilding and for training recruits. Through the winter of 1943 to 44, Hickman and his parachute regiment, like Howard and D Company, like von Luck and the 21st Panzer, were training. In June, Jim Wallach went to Algeria, where he learned to fly Waco gliders. American-built gliders that landed on skids, carried only 13 men and were difficult to handle, and were altogether despised by the British glider pilot regiment. The pilots were delighted when they heard that the Oliver Bolland and some others were going to fly a few horses down to North Africa, all the way from England. Wallach had told his American instructors, you be here tomorrow, and you've got to be here to see a proper bloody glider. You'll really see something. Then, by golly, here come the first Halifax and Horsa combination. Turning to his instructor, Wallach bellowed, look at that, you bloody Yank. There's a proper aeroplane, a proper glider, that's a proper thing. Oh, the truth of it. The Horsa cast off, did a circuit and came down and broke its bloody nose off. Imagine this, it was the first one in. Well, American friends were delighted about that. On the day of the invasion of Sicily, Jim flew a Waco with a lieutenant's 10 riflemen and a hand trailer full of ammunition. The type pilots were Americans flying Dakotas, which had no self-sealing tanks and no armored plate. Their orders were to avoid flak at all costs. When they approached the coastline and flak began to appear, most of the pilots cast off their gliders and turned back to sea. As a consequence of being let go too far out, 20 of the 24 gliders never made it to shore. Many of the men were drowned. Upon hearing this news, John Howard stepped up his swimming requirements. In Jim's case, he kept telling the Dakota pilot, get in, but the pilot would not get in. Instead, he turned away to sea. He made a second run and told Jim to drop off, but Jim would not. He could see that the coast was too far away and he yelled, get in. A third refusal by Jim let go. On the fourth pass, the Dakota pilot said calmly but firmly, James, I'm going now. You've got to let go. Jim let go, thinking he could just make it. He did, skidding in over the beach, onto a little rough field, fairly close to an Italian machine gun nest. The Italians opened fire and we all jumped out. We knew by then to get out the glider quickly. Jim turned his Sten gun on the Italians, thinking himself, right, this will do to you buggers. He pulled the trigger and nothing happened. The Sten had misfired. Fortunately, the Bren gun knocked out the opposition. As the section then began to unload the glider, the lieutenant asked Warco, well, where in the hell are we? Do you know where we are? As a matter of fact, sir, Jim replied, I think you should be congratulated. Whatever. I think you're the first Allied officer to attack the soft underbelly of Europe through the toe of Italy. Warwick claims today that he was so confused by all the passes he made at the beach that he really did think he had come down on the continent proper. But as the lieutenant merely snorted, well, I don't think much of that idea, and went about his task. Later that fall, Warwick was shipped back to England to participate in Operation Dead Stick. Pegasus Bridge by Stephen Ambrose. It's very cool. And now, the greatest raid of all, the raid on St. Nazaire by C. Lucas Phillips. Roy's Bridge. No less swift and successful was the performance of Roy's kilted team. Detailed to assault the task on the western side of the dock, disembarking on the port side of the destroyer's forecastle, and assisting between them Sergeant Jones, who had been wounded on board. They made off swiftly by the way they'd learnt so well from the model, silent in their rubber boots and carrying bamboo scaling ladders with them, Proctor having been so severely wounded. The laird was now the only officer. They had not far to go for their first task, which was to silence the gun positions, 64 and 65, on the roof of the big pumping station. Before he could make his attack, Roy saw the German teams in full flight across the shadowed dockyard, having escaped by an outside staircase. He called upon Sergeant Charrington with his Tommy gun, but the gun jammed after a few rounds. Roy then lobbed 2 grenades onto the roof, and following up quickly with Randall, found the guns deserted and he blew them up without difficulty. All 4 of these books are gorgeous books to read, and if you're interested in raiding in World War II combat experience, they're good books to get. They really are. And as ever, thanks to all of you subscribers, thanks to all you watchers, and thank you very much to my patrons. Take care.